My wife always denied me sex, so I discovered she was cheating on me with the neighbor while I was at work. My name's James, and I'm 31 years old. It's hard to explain just how much the void in my marriage has hurt me over the past few months. When I look back now, it seems like the absence of affection and intimacy between Sarah and me wasn't something sudden. It crept in slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it was all I could see. Sarah and I had been together for 7 years, and our relationship had always been strong. At least that's what I thought. We had our routine, our little rituals that made our life together feel complete. But recently, those moments of connection had become rare. I could count on one hand the number of times we had been intimate in the past few months, and even then, it felt mechanical, devoid of the warmth and closeness that used to be there. Every time I tried to talk to Sarah about it, she would brush it off with a quick explanation or a vague excuse. "I've been tired," she would say. Or, "It's just stress from work." I wanted to believe her, but a part of me started to feel that something was off. There was a distance between us that I couldn't quite bridge, no matter how hard I tried. It wasn't just the lack of intimacy. The emotional connection seemed to be fraying as well. We used to talk about everything, our hopes, our dreams, our fears. Now conversations felt superficial, like we were going through the motions. I tried to plan special evenings, surprise dates, anything to rekindle that spark, but each attempt seemed to fall flat. It was as if Sarah wasn't really present, even when she was physically there. One particular evening stands out in my mind. I had planned a nice dinner at home. I cooked her favorite meal and set the table with candles and soft music playing in the background. I was excited, hoping that this would be the night we would reconnect. But when Sarah came home from work, she barely seemed to notice the effort I had put in. She ate quickly and retreated to the living room, where she sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I tried to engage her, asking about her day, trying to spark a conversation, but she responded with short, distracted answers. As the night wore on, I could feel my own frustration building. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap that had grown between us, but it felt like there was an invisible wall separating us. I went to bed that night feeling more alone than I had in a long time. Days turned into weeks, and the pattern continued. Sarah's excuses became more frequent and more elaborate. She was working late, meeting friends, or just feeling too exhausted. I started to doubt myself, wondering if I was being too demanding or too needy. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I found something that made my heart drop. It was a small, pink scrap of fabric caught in the corner of the couch. It wasn't mine, and it certainly wasn't something Sarah would wear. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more painful than the last. I confronted Sarah about it that night. She dismissed it with a laugh, claiming it was from a new dress she had bought but never worn. I wanted to believe her. I really did, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she was letting on. As the days went by, I couldn't stop thinking about that scrap of fabric. I began to notice other small things: Sarah's phone constantly on silent, her odd behaviors, and the way she seemed to be avoiding eye contact when I asked her about her day. My mind was in a constant state of turmoil, and the emptiness I felt in our relationship was becoming unbearable. I started to question every interaction we had, replaying our conversations and trying to decipher any hidden meanings. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that Sarah was hiding something from me. I tried to talk to her again, but each conversation ended with her brushing me off, claiming I was overreacting. It was a painful realization, but I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. The void in our marriage wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was a deeper, more profound sense of disconnection. And as I watched Sarah go about her daily routine with an air of detachment, I couldn't help but feel that our once strong bond was slipping through my fingers. In my heart, I knew that something had to change. I needed to find out the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I couldn't continue living in this emotional desert, pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. And so, with a heavy heart and a growing sense of dread, I began to prepare myself for what I feared was coming. The days since I found that scrap of fabric had felt like a slow, torturous unraveling of my world. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong with Sarah and me. The void between us had deepened, and I was increasingly convinced that Sarah was hiding something significant. I had tried to brush off my suspicions, but they kept creeping back into my mind, each new day bringing a fresh wave of doubt. Her late nights at work became more frequent, and her phone was always on silent or hidden away. When I asked her about these changes, she always had a ready excuse: an unexpected project, a sudden dinner with friends, or simply being too tired to talk. One afternoon, as I was preparing to leave for work, I noticed Sarah's car wasn't in the driveway. It was unusual because she was always home by then, and I couldn't recall her mentioning any plans that would keep her out. My stomach tightened with unease, but I forced myself to push the thoughts aside and went about my day. When I returned home that evening, I found Sarah already there, which was normal, but there was something off about her demeanor. She was unusually quiet and seemed to be lost in thought. Her eyes avoided mine, and she was preoccupied with her phone, which she kept face down on the table. I tried to engage her in conversation, but she was distant and distracted, her answers curt and uninviting. A few days later, I decided to take a closer look at her phone while she was in the shower. I know it was a breach of trust, but I was desperate for answers. I found a series of text messages that made my heart pound. They were from someone named Tom, who seemed to be texting Sarah frequently about meeting up and sharing intimate details. The messages were carefully worded, but the tone was unmistakable. They spoke of meetings that couldn't be rearranged, of moments they'd shared, and of plans for more. My hands trembled as I read through them, each message reinforcing the painful truth that Sarah was seeing someone else. The discovery left me numb. I confronted Sarah later that evening, trying to stay calm despite the storm raging inside me. I asked her about Tom and the messages, but she denied everything with a practiced ease that only made me more suspicious. Her deflections and excuses felt hollow, and I could see the guilt flickering in her eyes despite her protests. In the days that followed, I became increasingly obsessed with uncovering the truth. I started paying more attention to her routines, trying to catch any discrepancies or signs of deception. I noticed that she would frequently leave the house for extended periods, always with a vague explanation about errands or work-related tasks. Each time she left, I would follow her discreetly, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was really happening. One afternoon, I trailed her to a local cafe. From a distance, I watched as she met with Tom, a man I had never seen before. They sat at a corner table, their body language intimate and relaxed. My heart sank as I saw them laugh and share touches that spoke of a closeness that should have been reserved for our relationship. I took pictures of them together, documenting the betrayal in painful detail. It felt surreal, seeing my wife so engrossed with another man while I stood on the sidelines, powerless and heartbroken. Each snapshot was a painful reminder of what had been taken from me. When I returned home, I was consumed by a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. I wanted to confront Sarah with everything I had seen and learned, but I needed to be sure of the full extent of her deceit first. I began to gather more evidence, documenting her behavior and piecing together the timeline of her affair with Tom. The emotional weight of my discovery was crushing. The once comforting familiarity of my home now felt like a prison filled with reminders of Sarah's betrayal. I was haunted by the thought of her intimate moments with Tom, replaying them over and over in my mind. One night, while Sarah was asleep, I found myself sitting alone in the dark, holding the pictures of her with Tom. The pain was almost too much to bear, and I felt a deep sense of loss, not just for the relationship we once had, but for the future I had envisioned with her. The love and trust we built together had been shattered, leaving me with a gaping hole where my hope and happiness used to be. I knew I couldn't keep living in this painful limbo. The evidence I had gathered pointed to a clear pattern of deceit and betrayal. I had to face the reality of what Sarah had done, no matter how much it hurt. The void between us had become an unbridgeable chasm, filled with the echoes of broken promises and shattered dreams. As I lay awake that night, the weight of the truth pressing down on me, I knew that my next steps would be crucial. I had to confront Sarah with the full scope of her betrayal and find a way to navigate through the wreckage of our relationship. The journey ahead would be painful, but I couldn't continue living in the shadows of deceit. The more I dug into the reality of Sarah's betrayal, the deeper the knife seemed to twist in my heart. Every new piece of evidence confirmed what I had feared and made the situation even more unbearable. My world, which had once felt so solid and dependable, was collapsing in on itself. Over the next few days, I threw myself into investigating the affair. I scrutinized every detail, every piece of evidence, desperately seeking some shred of truth that would explain why Sarah had chosen this path. My search led me to more incriminating texts between her and Tom, but I needed more than just messages to confirm the extent of her betrayal. I started tracking Sarah's movements more closely. Every time she left the house, I made a point of following her, hoping to piece together her actions and uncover the truth. I found that she often went to the same cafe where I had first seen her with Tom, as well as to various places around town where they seemed to meet regularly. One afternoon, I decided to visit Tom's house. My heart pounded as I stood outside, looking at the modest home just a few doors down from ours. The thought of confronting him was daunting, but I felt a desperate need to understand the full scope of the affair. I knocked on the door, but there was no answer. My hope of catching Tom in the act was dashed, and the reality of my situation sank in deeper. It wasn't until later that week, while I was sifting through Sarah's online activity, that I stumbled upon something truly damning. I found a series of photos on her social media accounts, pictures of her and Tom together, their smiles unmistakably intimate. There were pictures from outings, dinners, and even a couple of candid shots of them at what looked like a weekend getaway. It was clear that their relationship was not just physical, but emotional. A painful betrayal of everything we had built together. Each photo was like a punch to the gut. The happiness they shared, captured in these images, was a cruel contrast to the emptiness I felt inside. Seeing Sarah's smiles and the joy she seemed to find in Tom's company was a stark reminder of how far we had drifted apart. It was a visual representation of a love that was no longer mine, a love that had been given away to someone else. One night, as I reviewed all the evidence I had gathered, the weight of the situation became almost too much to bear. I felt a deep sense of despair, a void that seemed to swallow up everything I once believed in. The truth was inescapable. Sarah was not just having an affair. She was deeply involved with Tom, and it was clear that their relationship had been going on for some time. I replayed every moment from our relationship, trying to understand where things had gone wrong. The memories of our happier times felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of how naive I had been to think that our love was unbreakable. I felt a profound sense of loss, not just for the relationship itself, but for the future I had imagined with Sarah. The pain was consuming. Each day felt like a relentless assault on my emotions, as I grappled with the reality of Sarah's betrayal. I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but it was difficult to focus on anything other than the hurt and confusion that dominated my thoughts. My job, once a source of comfort and distraction, now felt like an additional burden, a reminder of how out of control my life had become. One evening, I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by the evidence of Sarah's affair. The photos, the messages, and the notes I had taken all lay spread out before me, a grim testament to the depth of her betrayal. The emptiness I felt was overwhelming, a hollow ache that seemed to resonate through every part of me. The discovery that Sarah was not just cheating, but was deeply involved with Tom, shattered my sense of reality. It was as if the ground had been ripped out from under me, leaving me in a state of emotional freefall. I had to come to terms with the fact that the woman I had loved and trusted was capable of such profound deceit. As the days passed, I knew I couldn't continue living in this limbo. The truth, as painful as it was, had to be confronted. I needed to address the betrayal head-on and face Sarah with the reality of her actions. The thought of the confrontation filled me with dread, but I knew it was necessary. I had to reclaim some semblance of control over my life and begin the process of healing. The journey ahead was daunting, filled with uncertainty and emotional turmoil. But I was determined to face it, no matter how painful it would be. The truth had been laid bare, and now I had to find a way to navigate through the wreckage of my relationship with Sarah. The path to healing would be long and difficult, but I knew I couldn't stay paralyzed in the shadows of deceit. It was time to confront the reality of the situation and begin the painful process of moving forward. The confrontation had been looming over me like a storm cloud, its arrival inevitable and dreadfully unavoidable. I had gathered all the evidence I needed, and my heart was pounding with a mixture of fear, anger, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal as I prepared to face Sarah. It was a quiet evening, the kind we used to cherish together. I sat in the living room, the photos and messages I had collected spread out before me. The sight of them, once so crushing, now fueled my resolve. I had to confront Sarah, and I had to do it now. When she walked in, her face brightened with the usual smile she wore when she came home. But the moment she saw me, sitting there with the damning evidence, her smile faltered. The silence that followed was heavy, each second stretching out unbearably. "Sarah," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk." Her expression shifted from confusion to apprehension. She sensed the gravity of the situation before I even said a word. I gestured to the coffee table where the photos and texts lay. "I know about Tom," I said, my voice cracking despite my effort to remain calm. "I know about the affair." Her face went pale, and she looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "James, I interrupted, my voice rising with the surge of emotion I'd been holding back. "Don't try to explain. I've seen everything, your messages, the photos, the places you've been. I know what's been happening." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she took a shaky breath. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. It got out of control." "Out of control?" I echoed, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "You're telling me that this was just some accident? That it wasn't a deliberate choice to betray me?" "I never wanted to hurt you," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Tom and I, what we had was a mistake. It meant nothing. I didn't want it to come to this." "Nothing?" I shouted, my anger boiling over. "How can you say it meant nothing? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around and meeting up with him behind my back. How is that nothing?" Sarah's tears flowed freely now, and she stepped closer to me, reaching out. "James, please, I know I've hurt you, and I don't know how to fix this. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to destroy our marriage." "Destroy it?" I nearly screamed. "You've done more than destroy it. You've shattered it into pieces. I trusted you, Sarah. I gave you everything, and you repaid that trust with deceit and betrayal." The depth of the pain I felt was overwhelming. I had spent countless nights replaying memories of us, trying to find where things had gone wrong. Now, the truth was laid bare, and it was far worse than I had imagined. The reality of Sarah's betrayal was like a knife twisting deeper into my heart, each word she spoke a fresh wound. "I don't know what else to say," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know that I've ruined everything, and I can't undo what's been done." "No," I said, shaking my head, "you can't undo it. You can't take back the lies, the secrets, or the hurt you've caused. What we had is gone, Sarah. It's gone because you chose to let it go." The room was filled with the echoes of our argument, each word a testament to the pain and betrayal we were both experiencing. Sarah's attempts to explain felt hollow and insincere, a feeble effort to mend what was irreparably broken. "I need you to leave," I said finally, my voice cold and resolute. "I need some space to process all of this. I need to figure out how to move forward without you." Sarah's face crumpled as she nodded, understanding the finality in my tone. "I'll leave," she said softly. "I'm so sorry, James. I never meant for any of this to happen." As she walked out of the house, I was left alone with the remnants of our shattered life. The silence that followed was deafening, a stark contrast to the intensity of our confrontation. I sat in the middle of the living room, surrounded by the evidence of her betrayal, feeling an overwhelming sense of emptiness. The pain was almost unbearable. I had to confront the reality of what had been lost, and it was a brutal and painful process. The love and trust I had once felt for Sarah had been replaced by a deep sense of betrayal. And the future we had planned together now seemed like a distant, unreachable dream. As the night wore on, I found myself sitting in darkness, the the weight of my emotions pressing down on me. The confrontation had been necessary, but it had left me feeling more lost and broken than ever before. I had faced the truth, but the road to healing was still ahead, and it was a road I knew would be long and arduous. I had to find a way to move forward, to pick up the pieces of my life and begin the process of healing. The journey would be painful, and the scars of Sarah's betrayal would remain with me for a long time. But I knew I had to face it, no matter how difficult it would be. The process of rebuilding my life had to start now, and it would begin with confronting the deep emotional wounds left by the betrayal. The days following Sarah's departure were the hardest I had ever faced. The house, once filled with the echoes of our laughter and shared dreams, now felt cold and empty. Every corner seemed to echo the pain of what had been lost, and each room was a reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my life. In the beginning, the numbness was overwhelming. I moved through the days like a ghost, going through the motions of daily life without truly engaging in any of it. Work became a refuge, a place where I could focus on something other than the relentless ache in my chest. I threw myself into my job with an almost obsessive dedication, hoping that keeping busy might help me forget the pain. But the nights were different. The silence of the empty house was a stark contrast to the noise of the day. And it was during these quiet moments that the reality of Sarah's betrayal hit me hardest. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every detail of our life together and the crushing weight of her infidelity. I knew I needed to find a way to cope with the emotional fallout, so I sought out therapy. Talking to a professional felt like a necessary step towards healing. In those sessions, I allowed myself to express the anger, sadness, and confusion I had been holding in. The therapist helped me navigate the labyrinth of my emotions and provided guidance on how to start rebuilding my life. In the end, picking up the pieces was not about erasing the past, but about learning to live with it and move forward. The journey was filled with challenges, but it also offered opportunities for growth and self-discovery. I learned to appreciate the strength I had within me and to embrace the possibility of a new beginning. The process of healing and rebuilding my life was a testament to my resilience and my commitment to finding happiness again. While the scars of betrayal would always remain, they had become a part of my story rather than the entirety of it. I was determined to create a future that was rich with possibility and filled with the promise of new experiences. As I closed this chapter of my life, I felt a sense of hope and renewal. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I faced it with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of myself. The journey to picking up the pieces had been painful, but it had also been profoundly transformative. I was ready to embrace the future with open arms and a heart that, though scarred, was still capable of healing and love. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next video. See you next time.